Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 589 Information about the Enemy Venerables. Chapter 589 Information about the Enemy Venerables. While the troops were resting, Alaric received the Empress's summons. He followed the messenger sent by the Empress, and he later found himself in front of a tent. Her Majesty is waiting for you inside. The messenger gestured at him to enter the tent. Alaric nodded without saying a word. Galliner and Sekus wanted to follow him inside, but the guards outside the tent didn't allow them to enter. Only His Highness is permitted inside. The two you will have to remain here. Hearing this, Alaric signaled at them and said, "Wait here. I will be all right." Sekus and Galliner acknowledged his instructions. They saluted and stood outside the tent to wait for him. Upon stepping inside, Alaric saw the Empress and a few more people sitting before a round table with solemn faces. The Grand Commander, Bai Seolhua, Kangjian Jianhua, and a four-ringed beast soul grandmaster who he was unfamiliar with was there. Alaric used his appraisal on the unknown guy. His name was Min Taehyun, an old man who looked to be in his 60s. He had a slender physique, like a fragile scholar with no combat prowess. However, this guy was no slouch. In terms of overall combat abilities, he was on the same level as Ignatius Firecrest. The level of Veronica's upper echelons is on another scale. Alaric furrowed his eyebrows as he calmly assessed the difference between these people and the Venerables of Astania. If it weren't for the heretic cult, Veronica would have been the first one to attack Astania. He thought to himself. He had seen the overwhelming strength of the experts in this nation. They also possessed a huge number of loyal warriors who were ready to die for their country. Alaric could already imagine the amount of bloodshed that would be inflicted if Astania were to go into war against Veronica. He took a deep breath to organize his thoughts. I must make them feel indebted to Astania. That is the only way to end the decade-long hatred between the two nations. Please sit down, Your Highness. The Empress nodded to him as she motioned for him to take the vacant seat in between Min Taehyun and Kangjian Jianhua. Alaric nodded and calmly took his seat. Min Taehyun turned to him and sent him a friendly smile. Alaric returned the gesture and also smiled at him. He found this guy more approachable than the two ladies from the Crimson Phoenix Knights Order. Before we begin, let me introduce you to my most trusted confidants. The gentleman to your right is Min Taehyun. He is the Duke of Bulgassaran, a mighty four-ringed beast soul grandmaster. The Empress proudly introduced. Min Taehyun used the greeting gesture of the Astanians by cupping his fists to Alaric. It's an honor to meet the renowned Alaric Silversword. The honor is mine, Lord Taehyun. Alaric exchanged pleasantries with the old man. They wanted to speak some more, but the Empress cut them off. To your left is the Deputy Commander of the Crimson Phoenix Knights Order, Kangjian Jianhua. She is a mythical knight. Kangjian Jianhua reluctantly cupped her fists to greet Alaric. Looking her expression, Alaric chuckled in amusement. It's an honor, Deputy Commander Kangjian. Amen. Kangjian Jianhua hummed in response. She couldn't be bothered to exchange pleasantries with him. The Empress introduced him to the last person. And this is the commander of the Crimson Phoenix Knights Order, Bai Seolhua. Bai Seolhua was a silent woman, but she wasn't as stubborn as her deputy. She looked at Alaric and nodded to him. Alaric smiled at her. It's an honor to meet you, Commander Bai. Let's cut the introductions short. We can interact more after we resolve the pressing issues. The Empress clapped her hands to get their attention. We have received the reports from the remnants of the Duchess's warriors. According to them, the heretic cult has 150,000 followers inside Ulmunson. They are armed and dangerous, she emphasized with a stern look. Although they are not strictly trained in military tactics, they are fearless in the face of death, and they have this sense of violence that makes them stronger than common soldiers. So they are just a ragtag bunch of violent lunatics. Kangjian Jianhua sneered with her arms crossed. Your Majesty, please give me 50,000 troops to command. That will be enough to destroy those vermins, she confidently stated. Kangjian Jianhua, you are being disrespectful to Her Majesty. Bai Seolhua sent her deputy a look of reproach. Kangjian Jianhua realized her mistake and quickly apologized. I apologize for my impertinence, Your Majesty. The Empress didn't seem to mind this. She treated these two ladies as her sisters, so she wasn't angered by Kangjian Jianhua's attitude. She waved her hand and replied, "It's fine, but we should proceed with more caution. The heretic cult has sent Rin Aspen and 2 more venerables to conquer Ulmunson. To emerge victorious against them, we must fight as one," the Empress exclaimed. When they heard her mention the name Rin Aspen, the faces of the 3 were drained of color. Only Alaric sat there with a confused expression. Rin Aspen? Just who is that person that he could strike fear to these experts? He was curious. As if sensing his curiosity, the Empress said, "Rin Aspen was once a general of Veronica. He served the late emperor of the nation, but after I killed that person, Rin Aspen vanished into thin air. He later reappeared as a member of the heretic cult. He is not someone that we can take lightly," she added. "I see." Alaric rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "The other 2 venerables are not as famous as him. We also don't have much information about them. We only know that they came to Veronica with the cult leader." The Empress tapped her fingers on the table and said, "I will handle Rin Aspen. I want the 4 of you to deal with those 2. We obey Your Majesty's commands." Seeing that Alaric wasn't responding, the Empress looked at him and asked, "What do you think, Your Highness?" Alaric took a deep breath and replied, "I will follow your instructions." Aeschylus smiled faintly. "Good. Now listen carefully. This is how our armies should move." Chapter 590 The Central Army Charges into Battle. Chapter 590 The Central Army Charges into Battle. For hours later, the troops went into formation. Alaric and his subordinates were placed in the Central Army with the vanguard unit led by the Crimson Phoenix Knights Order. Their task was to storm the main entrance where the heretic cult had placed most of their troops. At this moment, Alaric was riding on a horse he had gotten from the Imperial Guards. He looked at the distant city grimly, waiting for the central commander's signal to charge. Everyone waited patiently while gripping their weapons tightly. "Central Army, charge!" By Sealwa's voice echoed like a beautiful war melody. She rode her mount as she pointed her weapon forward, glaring at their target with a fierce look. "Follow the commander!" Kangjian Jianhua roared, following closely behind her commander. The members of the Crimson Phoenix Knights Order issued bell-like war cries as they charged with great momentum. The Central Army was the first to advance, signaling the beginning of the battle. Halfway through their charge, huge boulders came flying overhead and crushed into their soldiers with overwhelming force. Boom! 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 "They are using the city's artillery. Brace yourselves for impact!" Kangjian Jianhua shouted to the troops. To minimize casualties, the Transcendent Knights targeted the boulders and the artillery shells before they could hit the ground. Alaric wasn't idle either. He casually brandished his swords, cutting the huge boulders into tiny fragments. The soldiers of Veronica were awed by his power, boosting their morale to the highest levels. "Continue advancing," Alaric shouted. He then squeezed his legs, urging his horse to move faster. He could already see the enemy troops atop the walls. They seemed to be preparing for another round of artillery attacks. "Watch out! They still have ammunition," he warned the troops, his face looking grim. "We didn't bring any siege machines, so we need to climb up the walls and open the gates from the inside," he thought to himself. The heretic cult fired artillery shells upon them, but with the efforts of the Transcendents, they managed to keep the losses to a minimum. The troops encountered traps along the way, but they weren't much of a threat. Luckily, the heretic cult didn't have much time to set up traps. We would have suffered heavy losses here. Suddenly, the main gate sprang open. A large number of enemy troops came pouring out of the gate. Alaric assessed them with a frown. Most of them are cavalry and the rest are infantrymen. With a cold snort, he kicked his horse's belly, spurring it to rush forward. He raised his short sword and bellowed, "On me! Crush them! Kill them all!" The Veronican troops responded to his call. In the next moment, a powerful collision between the 2 armies broke out. Bodies flew left and right as screams echoed in all directions. It was a brutal sight, but the soldiers didn't seem to be affected by it. They pushed forward without fear, waving their weapons at their enemies. Alaric was at the epicenter of the battle. He was surrounded by enemies from all sides. "Come at me, vermins of the heretic cult!" he cried out as he brandished his swords with overwhelming power. With a series of slashes, he dismembered the bodies of the enemy soldiers who tried to block his path. "Ah! My hand! Ah!" Alaric's armor was covered in blood. The nauseating metallic scent was strong, but as a war veteran, he was already used to this. He didn't even bother to wipe off the blood that splashed on his face. He charged into the enemy lines without stopping. He was like an unstoppable beast. Whoever tried to block his path ended up dying under his swords. Alaric left a trail of blood in his wake. Our targets are not here. Do they intend to weaken us before showing up? He furrowed his eyebrows as he pulled the reins of his horse. He scanned the battlefield, but he couldn't find the enemy venerables. They were nowhere in sight. Inside the dungeon somewhere in Almunson, the prisoners were still unaware that the reinforcement troops had already engaged with the soldiers of the heretic cult. Will someone come to save us? One of the prisoners mumbled. Of course. Her Majesty will never allow her subjects to be mistreated like this. I'm sure Her Majesty will storm Almunson with hundreds of thousands of soldiers. A captive general snorted. Park Sagwa could hear them clearly, but she didn't join their conversation. With her mana sealed, she couldn't heal the wounds inflicted upon her, so she had to preserve her strength. What do they intend to do with us? She had a bad feeling ever since they had been captured. She noticed that only those above the elite knights were here. The rest had already been taken to a separate location, their fates uncertain. Suddenly, they heard a series of footsteps from the corridor. The prisoners turned their heads and saw an old man with a gnarly scar on his face. Seeing this person, the prisoners were terrified. Even the Duchess, Park Sagwa, revealed a look of fear. Rin Aspen was said to be a vicious swordsman, but this guy right here was even more dangerous. They had seen him dissecting the corpses of their fallen comrades. It was something that would never be erased from their minds. Kakik, why are you looking at me with those faces? Do I look ugly? With a smirk, the old man grabbed the iron bars and looked at the terrified prisoners. What do you want from us? A captive general asked with a frown. The old man rubbed his chin and replied with an eerie smile. I wonder. Bring that guy to me. He gestured to the heretic cult members who had followed him. Gladly, my lord. It so happened that one of them was Fu Tayson, the guy who had been mistreating them. Fu Tayson grinned as he opened the prison door. As soon as the door was opened, a few prisoners pounced at him with furious faces. I will kill you, Fu Tayson. Die, asshole. Chapter 591, The Terrible Drug That Turns People into Mindless Monsters. Chapter 591, The Terrible Drug That Turns People into Mindless Monsters. Fu Tayson sneered. He already expected this kind of reaction from them. He lifted his foot and released a couple of kicks that sent the attacking prisoners flying. Pa! 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 With your mana sealed, what can you idiots do to me? He laughed with disdain. Shut your mouth, you damn bastard. Release me if you have the balls. Fu Tayson ignored their insults and walked towards the guy pointed out by the old man. Come with me if you don't want to get hurt. He grabbed the captive general and tried to drag him out of the cell, but the latter suddenly spat a mouthful of saliva at his face. 2. Veins protruded on Fu Tayson's face. He grabbed the captive general by the neck and muttered, Do you think I wouldn't kill you? The captive general squirmed as he gasped for breath. It looked like he was struggling, but he didn't beg for mercy. Release the general, you asshole. A group of prisoners rushed towards him, but they were all subdued by the members of the heretic cult. Fu Tayson, don't kill him. I still need them all alive for my experiments. The old man's impatient voice drifted into their ears. Fu Tayson immediately released the general's neck with a snort. You're lucky. He grabbed the man's arm and dragged him out of the cell. What do you intend to do with him, Lord San? Fu Tayson asked with a curious look. The old man named Sun sent him a deep look and replied, Just watch and you'll know. He grabbed something from his inner pocket and stuffed it into the general's mouth. Kakik! The old man cackled eerily. What did you make me eat? The general was alarmed. He tried to spit out the thing that was forced into his throat, but it had already dissolved in his stomach. What you just ate is the result of my decade-long research. Kakik, just wait for a minute. It should take effect soon. Sen laughed with a look of excitement. The general became more anxious with his words. You damn old man. Give me the fucking antidote. He stood up and grabbed the old man by the collar. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Fu Tayson was about to interfere, but the old man, San, stopped him with a grin. Suddenly, the captive general's face became unsightly. He could feel an unusual sensation on his chest. What is to dash? His words were cut off as a sudden burst of pain struck his head. He grabbed his head and knelt on the ground, screaming. Ah! Seeing this, San burst into peals of laughter. It's happening, he exclaimed. The prisoners could only watch their comrade suffer all by himself, unable to do anything. They hurled threats at the old man, but their words fell on deaf ears. After some time, the general's screams died out. A massive change also occurred in his body. His skin turned a shade darker with patches of purple, looking incredibly hideous. Roar! A beast-like roar came out of his mouth. Excellent! It worked! Sen laughed with pure joy. In the next moment, the general burst with unknown power and broke free from his restraints. He then pounced on Fu Tayson, who was standing next to him. Roar! Fu Tayson was caught off guard, but he still managed to react in time. He unsheathed his weapon and thrust it at the general's chest. The general didn't evade his sword, so it penetrated through his chest and out of his back. KHSHK. However, the general didn't seem to feel any pain. He roared and grabbed onto Fu Tayson's arm like an iron clamp. How dare you! Fu Tayson unleashed his mana in an attempt to shake off the general, but the guy stuck to him like glue. Shit, where did he get this strength? In their struggle, the general managed to take a bite of his flesh. He pulled his head and tore off a huge chunk of flesh and blood, making Fu Tayson scream with agony. Lord Sen, help me! He cried out while looking at the old man. The other members of the heretic cult also tried to pull the general away from his body, but the guy didn't even budge. Useless fool! Sen clicked his tongue in annoyance. He then stepped forward and grabbed the general by the neck. With a strong tug, he managed to separate the general from Fu Tayson. Tie him up! He shouted to the members of the heretic cult. While the old man was holding the general, they tied his limbs with thick mithril chains. It took them great effort to restrain him. Fu Tayson put pressure on his bleeding shoulder to stop the blood from flowing. With a pale face, he asked the old man, "What happened to him, Lord Sen?" The old man grinned and replied with excitement. The pill converted his mana into raw power. It forcefully changed the structure of his body to achieve the peak of humanity. In exchange for that power, it turned him into a mindless monster. It's fascinating, isn't it? Fu Tayson frowned at his words. For your bullshit research, I almost got killed. Fuck. He was furious, but he didn't dare show it on his face. He was afraid that the old man would force him to swallow the pill if he were to show even a trace of anger. San turned his head to the prisoners and mumbled with an eerie smile. Wouldn't it be fun to see the Empress fight her own loyal subjects? Kakik. Just the thought of it makes me excited. Kakik. Hearing this, the prisoners were left terrified. They had seen the power of the drug. Even the general, who was a transcendent knight, fell victim to its terrible effects. You demon! You will face retribution for this demonic behavior, exclaimed an old official who couldn't stand the situation. Sun grinned at him and said, Bring him out. He will be the next one to taste this awesome creation of mine. Kakik. Chapter 592 Storming the City. Chapter 592 Storming the City. The prisoners turned pale with fear. The old official was dragged out of the cell and was forced to swallow the demonic pill. Unlike the general, who lasted for some time, the old official became a mad monster in just a quarter of a minute. The members of the heretic cult restrained him so he couldn't attack them. Roar! The prisoners were terrified. 2 of their comrades had been forcefully turned into mindless beasts. The thought of them being forced to become one filled them with profound fear. Weren't you guys shouting earlier? What happened? Kakik. San grabbed the iron bars as he scanned the faces of the prisoners. Suddenly, his eyes stopped on Park Sagwa, who was glaring at him with intense fury. Oh my! I like that stubborn look in your eyes. Your Grace. Kakik. The old man grinned and waved his hands at his subordinates. Bring her out. She will be next. Kakik. Hearing this, the prisoners immediately circled the Duchess. No, not Her Grace. I will do it instead. One of the remaining captive generals offered himself with a pleading look. Some officials also volunteered to take the demonic pill. San furrowed his eyebrows. For how long do you intend to hide behind your subordinates? Park Sagwa? The Duchess stared deeply at him, her eyes radiating with intense hatred. Step back, all of you. She stepped forward without fear. She was the Duchess of House Park, a respected venerable of Veronica. She would never yield to the members of the heretic cult. San clicked his tongue. The Duchess's stubbornness made him a bit annoyed. Hold on. He raised his hand. Fu Tayson and the heretic cult members backed down at his signal. The old man walked towards the Duchess and stopped just a few inches from her. He tilted his head and observed the emotional fluctuations in her eyes. However, the Duchess's eyes remained serene, as if she were unafraid of what was about to happen. He cupped her chin and let out a wicked laugh. Let's see how long you can keep that stubborn facade. Kakik. Park Sagwa was disgusted. She pulled her head to free herself from his touch. She then spat on his face and muttered, Don't touch me, you disgusting old shitface. Sen's smile deepened. He licked her spit and commanded, Strip her naked and show them how manly the members of the heretic cult are. Hearing this, the Duchess gritted her teeth, her eyes revealing a trace of panic. The prisoners were both terrified and furious. Hey, you old fart. Aren't you afraid of Her Majesty's wrath? Don't you dare touch Her Grace with your filthy hands. Fu Tayson and the members of the heretic cult smiled evilly as they tore the Duchess's clothes off. Stop! Stop, you beasts! Don't touch her! The prisoners couldn't bear to see the Duchess being humiliated in front of them. They were furious, but there was nothing they could do. The others looked away, trembling, their faces filled with guilt and remorse. "Why, Your Grace?" San watched the members of the heretic cult take turns to force themselves upon the Duchess's body. "Kakik! Get her to swallow the pill once you are done playing with her." He tossed the demonic pill to Futaisen. "Yes, my lord." Meanwhile, the battle outside the city was becoming increasingly fierce. The left wing and the right wing of the Veronican army launched an attack on the east and west gates respectively. It was an all-out assault against the forces of the heretic cult. Do they really intend to let their troops die meaninglessly? Alaric charged straight into the heart of the enemy's formation, but he still couldn't find the enemy venerables. With the absence of the enemy's top powerhouses, the Veronican army managed to force its way into the city in just an hour. The warriors of the heretic cult couldn't stop them, but they still fought with fervor. "These bloody lunatics! Do they not fear death?" exclaimed the deputy commander of the Crimson Phoenix Knights Order, Kangjian Jianhua. The streets near the gates were already filled with the corpses of the enemy soldiers. The overwhelming stench of blood lingered in the air. It was a one-sided massacre, but the heretic cult army didn't seem to have the intention to retreat. They fought with reckless abandon. They charged at the Veronican army with no proper formation. It was sheer madness and insanity. "Push forward. We must save the residents of Ulmunson." After another hour, the heretic cult army was annihilated, their corpses strewn across the streets. "We must hurry. They still have the Duchess and the others," shouted Kangjian Jianhua to the troops. Everyone rushed to the estate of House Park, but their advance came to an abrupt halt when they saw an army barricading the road. "Enemy troops up ahead. Archers, fire at my signal." Bai Seohua raised her hand, signaling a change in formation. The trained soldiers moved into formation in an orderly manner. The archers stepped forward and released their arrows at the enemy troops. Su! 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 They were expecting an easy battle, but something unexpected happened. The thousands of arrows that blotted the sky were stopped by an unknown force. The first one to notice the abnormality was the Empress, who had just regrouped with the Central Army. "They are here," she murmured with a frown. "Shield bearers, forward. Protect your comrades," she commanded with a wave of her hand. Just as her voice fell, the arrows that were suspended in the sky fell upon them. "Su! Su! Su!" The Empress's timely command saved the troops, but they still suffered some casualties. A few unlucky warriors were pierced by the arrows, killing them on the spot. At this moment, Alaric glanced in a certain direction and locked his eyes on someone from the enemy's side. Because of the distance between them, he couldn't see the enemy's face clearly, but his appraisal trait allowed him to recognize the enemy's power. "So they have come." Chapter 593 Despicable Methods. Chapter 593 Despicable Methods. "Tear through their barricade," the Empress roared as she valiantly led the charge. The cavalrymen followed closely behind her, forming a triangle with her as the spearhead. "Crush their flimsy barricades," shouted the Veronican troops as they gathered their strength in preparation for the impact. Bang! The cavalrymen slammed into the hastily made barricades with overwhelming force, crushing them upon contact. The enemy troops collided with the Veronican army, but they could not stop their momentum. At this moment, Alaric didn't even need to do much. He just followed behind the cavalrymen and watched them demolish the enemy troops. However, he felt that something was wrong with the enemy forces. They were much weaker than the soldiers they fought at the walls. "Something feels off." He frowned. Out of instinct, he used his appraisal on the enemy soldiers and realized that most of them were just ordinary people. He couldn't understand why the heretic cult would use the ordinary followers to fight with the Veronican army. It was then that something occurred to him. Hold on. We should have annihilated most of their soldiers. How come they still have this many soldiers? The information they got from the remnants of House Park didn't match the actual number of enemies. He pulled the reins of his horse and looked at the scattered corpses on the ground. Using the tip of his sword, he removed the helmet of a fallen enemy soldier. To his shock, he saw the young face of someone who seemed to be in his mid-teens. Is he really a member of the heretic cult's army? How could someone this young? He got down from his horse and went to another corpse. He lifted the helmet, but this time he saw a young woman in her late teens. The cult is using ordinary followers as cannon fodder? The discovery made him furious and baffled at the same time. No sane person would volunteer as cannon fodder. I have a bad feeling about this. I need to warn Her Majesty. He jumped onto his horse and shouted. Stop! There is something wrong with the enemy troops. He used mana to amplify his voice so everyone heard him clearly. The Veronican army was surprised by his words. The Empress and the other venerables were also stunned. What do you mean, Alaric? The Empress frowned as she looked at him. Alaric pointed at the corpses and replied, "I think they are using ordinary people as cannon fodder. The heretic cult must have used some despicable methods to force these people to join the war." His words made the Empress's face fall. She was so focused on destroying the enemies that she didn't notice these small details. She quickly amplified her perception using her mana and was shaken when she realized that most of the corpses were young people. "What have we done?" The Veronican army went to check the corpses and were shocked when they found out that Alaric was telling the truth. Suddenly, they heard someone bursting into laughter. Everyone turned their heads in the same direction and saw a middle-aged man with short brown hair. He had an amused look in his eyes as if he was enjoying the situation. "It took you that long to notice it? Ha ha ha. You! What is going on here?" The Empress gripped her sword tightly as she stared coldly at the man. The man looked at her and let out a wide grin as he responded. "Haven't you noticed it? Why do you think the city is empty? Have you found a resident since coming here?" Hearing this, everyone's eyes widened as it finally dawned on them. "Ha ha ha. The people you desperately wanted to protect ended up dying in your hands." The man face-bombed himself as he laughed raucously. The Empress felt her heart tightening. What is he saying? This can't be. She looked at the dead enemy soldiers with an absent-minded gaze. Some of the soldiers of the Veronican army fell on their knees, their faces filled with deep remorse. "No! We killed our own people." The morale of the troops fell to rock bottom. No one wanted to fight anymore. Seeing this, the middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and made a hand gesture while using his psychokinetic power to steal everyone's weapons. The sudden pulling force caught the Veronican army by surprise. Most of them couldn't hold onto their weapons and were quickly disarmed. "Oh no! My sword! My spear!" Thousands of weapons hovered in the sky. "Ha ha ha! Glory to the heretic cult!" The middle-aged man laughed coldly as he controlled the weapons through his mind. This was his power, a psychokinetic ability that he had integrated from a catastrophe-grade monster. As long as he had enough mana, he could control any object with just a thought. The tens of thousands of weapons struck the Veronican soldiers, killing thousands of them in just a matter of seconds. The others quickly reacted and defended themselves from the rain of weapons. Screams of agony echoed following that unexpected attack. "You despicable vermin! I will kill you!" Kangjian Jianhua rushed towards the middle-aged man while gathering mana into her spear. The middle-aged man sneered. "You want to kill me? You need more than dash." He couldn't finish his words because he suddenly sensed a wave of danger behind him. He instinctively ducked his head. Whoosh! He evaded a glaive by a hair's breadth. When did she? He saw a white-haired woman with red eyes, fiercely brandishing her glaive at him. "Bai Seol-Hua!" he shouted, his face covered in sweat. That strike nearly killed him. If he were even a split second late, his head would have been cut off. Bai Seol-Hua's eyes were seething with fury. She pointed her glaive at him and muttered, "You will pay for this, dog of the heretic cult." Whoosh! Her figure blurred as she moved with lightning speed. The middle-aged man could not follow her movements. "Shit! She is too fast. I need to retreat." He quickly turned around, but before he could take a step, he saw Kangjian Jianhua's sword just half a foot away from his chest. Clang! Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.